I'm Ann Mullins. I'm from the University of North Dakota, and I love how you all set up the schedule because I feel like my presentation just follows on so nicely with Dean Floyd and Professor Longin's fabulous presentation on professional identity. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about that. And what I'd like to kind of let you guys talk about is how at the University of North Dakota we've sort of started building professional identity into our curriculum. At Mercer's about 10 to 15 years ahead of us. We still feel like we're sort of ahead of the curve as well, having an entire course that sort of focuses on things like professional identity. The name of the course is called Professional Foundations. And the goal of the course is to encourage students to develop the habit of self-reflection in the formation of the professional identity and in the exercise of sound professional judgment. We split the course up into sort of 3 different units. First is professional being, the second is client relationships, and the third is sort of what Judge Colvin was talking about, sort of the life to law, practice environments. In the first unit, we do this in the second semester of the 1L year. So it's a really great opportunity for us to sort of have the 1Ls come back together, kind of pick themselves up after getting grades that they may not be accustomed to earning, and to talk to them about the course. The way that the course is set up is that it's team taught by almost all members of our faculty, and we made a commitment as professors that we would spend at least once a week for 2 hours. We'd spend at least half of that time doing student-centered active learning, all right? So not content delivery, okay? And so that first class, one of the things we used to talk to them about is, well, how are you going to be a good group member? How are you going to be an active learner? Because what we've learned is that it's a learned skill, and most people don't ever actually have formal training and teaching in it, right? So we take a little bit of time to talk about that. And then we have 4 individual sessions. One talks about laws of profession, the history, what it means to be a lawyer, professional identity, a lawyer's role as an advocate, and a lawyer's role as a counselor. In our second unit, client relationships, we talk about client individuality. Okay, how do you relate to a client who is very different from yourself? Right? How do you listen? We also talk about business representation in general and pro bono representation. And we end the semester with practice environments, because a lot of our students at North Dakota, which I suspect is probably true for a lot of law students, they're the first person in their family to get a postgraduate degree. They are not from families of lawyers, right? So they come in knowing that they want to do something in the law with, this energy and enthusiasm, and just, they don't have the direction because why would they, right? And so part of our job is to kind of help them sort of orient themselves a little bit, and that's what this third unit does. We talk to them about what's it like to work in a private law firm? What kind of law do you practice? What's it like to be a public servant in the government, right? What exactly, everybody says I want to do public interest law. Well, what is that, right? How do you do that? Do you just have to be a civil rights litigator, or can you do something entrepreneurial, right? And we finish up talking about the judiciary, how to serve both as a law clerk, as a judge, and what that means. And so what I'd like to talk a little bit more in depth about is our session on professional identity. My colleague, who many of you know, Tammy Pettinato, and I got the very good luck of kind of coming into the professional identity session and leading it. And we decided to sort of divide it into 3 different parts, okay? The pre-class part, right? Class preparation. We have the students, and I'll go a little bit more into depth about each of these, but we have them complete a core values exercise, and we ask them some reflection questions, okay? In the first half of class, we talked about values and theory, and in the second half of class, we talked about how we might use those values to start shaping our professional identities. So before class, the students filled out what was called a core values exercise. This was wildly popular with the students. And basically what it is it's an exercise where you get a big checklist of 3 pages of values. And it was actually kind of weird. Actually, I can show it to you. Here's just a screenshot of one page. Some of it was I don't know what some of these are weird, like distinguishes on there. I don't really know what that means, but there are lots of other good ones, like adventure, altruism, compassion, right? And what we had the students do is kind of check off any of those that really, really spoke to them, really resonated with them. If they came out with more than about 7, we had them sort of, they've got a call to list, right? Identify the likes, start prioritizing. Then when they had their final 7 or so, we had them rank them, so that, when these things come into conflict, what wins, okay? And Tammy and I actually did this exercise ourselves beforehand. And it was really fabulous. It was a really nice way to kind of gut check ourselves. Where am I now? Is what I'm doing kind of consistent with my values? So it was it's sort of a nice kind of keep with you beacon. And so we had the students do that before class. We also had them start engaging in some reflection, okay? And one of the things that we had them reflect on is their current professional self, okay? Reflect on the choices that you've made thus far in law school, from class prep to socializing outside of law school, and kind of describe yourself to yourself. What is your current professional identity, okay? What parts of your identity are consistent with your values, and what parts are not consistent with your values, okay? And we set it up this way on purpose. One of the things we wanted to sort of reinforce for them was that as law students, professional identity is important now. It's not something you can kind of like press pause, press hold. I'm super stressed and busy. I'll think about that in 3 years when I get out of law school, right? Because when that happens, they're going to get into law school and be like, oh God, I'm super stressed. Press pause. I'll think about that, when I'm on my feet. While, 3 years down, and it's press pause, right? So to kind of start that self-reflection early, right? And also to drive home the point that they are developing a professional identity now, right? Do you want to be, in my law school class, we'll just call her Drunk Mary, right? Do you want to be Drunk Mary, right? Or do you want to be the person who somebody's going to say, you know what? I've got some business to refer, I'll call that person. But to sort of put it into real context for them. We also asked them to think about, of course, because this is a trajectory, their future professional self, right? Who do they want to be in 5 years? How does that person practice their core values, right? So are the values they identified consistent with who they see themselves becoming? What steps can they take to become that person? And what challenges can they foresee? Right? Because again, kind of setting them up to realize that sometimes we're going to do things that aren't consistent with our values, and sometimes we're going to face challenges that are going to bring our values into conflict. That's normal, right? That's something that you need to engage with, think about, reflect on, instead of saying, they will get solved, I'll just keep moving forward, right? So this was sort of our pre-class sort of priming of the pump. When they got to class, what we wanted to do was set the tone, because one of the things that Tam and I, after a lot of thought and reflection ourselves and talking to our colleagues, we've kind of developed the belief that one of the reasons our profession is so depressed, anxious, divorced, unhappy, is because we never develop the habit of self-reflection, right? Because, and it's really hard, because I think as law students, and even as young lawyers, and shoot, even as maybe not young lawyers, you think like, oh, well, I can easily identify the left turn where I went off course. Easy peasy, right? Not so, right? And we, really believe that developing self-reflection and self-awareness in a professional setting is key to kind of not being the depressed lawyer, not being the anxious lawyer. There's more to it, but sort of in terms of professional health, we thought that was really important. Now, instead of telling the students this, right, because they're not going to believe it, we just shared a story, and it was based on a true story of a woman who went to law school who was absolutely passionate about public interest work, right? Really wanted to dedicate her life to civil rights. And she got to law school, and what she quickly learned was that law school was expensive. In addition to being passionate about civil rights and altruistic, she was also debt averse, right? She wasn't comfortable taking on a lot of debt. So 2L summer rolls around, and she, instead of taking that, the lower paid or unpaid positions with nonprofits, she went the firm route. Why? Well, golly, $2,500 a week. How can you not? Right? So it made a lot of sense. It put her mind at ease, right? And so she moved forward, and when it came time to apply for long-term jobs, geez, she was more in debt than ever, right? So it comes time to apply for jobs, and she thinks, well, 2 years. I'll go to the big firm, I'll do the complex litigation, I'll bill a gazillion hours, and I'll make boatloads of money and pay off my debts, and at 2 years, I'm done. So 2 years rolled around, and she was full of adrenaline, right? Completely exhausted, and 2 years went, and she stayed put. Okay? 3 years came up on the horizon, full of adrenaline, exhausted, making great money, right? 3 years came up, and it went. And then 4 years came up, and it went, right? And 5 years came up, and it went. And, if you'd asked this person at any point in these 5 years, are you happy? The answer actually would have been, well, yeah, work, they call it work for a reason. They don't call it, I'm going to fun today, like I'm going to work today, right? So she would have thought, like, yeah, absolutely, I'm happy. And one day on the way to work, she had a really curious thought, and it kind of made her laugh. She said, I gotta tell my husband this. Come home from work, and here's the story. She said, I was driving to work this morning, and the craziest thought, went across my mind. Wouldn't it be great if I got into a car wreck that was bad enough that I was out of work for like 2 months, but like not maiming? Right? Not so bad, it's like cause permanent damage, right? It's just like, isn't this so funny? And her husband was like, oh geez, right? Red flag is waving above your head, and darling, you don't even see it, right? And at that moment, her husband said, put on the brakes. This isn't who you are, right? And we talked about this story with the students, and a lot of them really identified with it, right? They had reasons for going to law school. It's North Dakota, so our law school is insanely inexpensive in my view, but it's upper Midwest, okay? Kids don't want to spend any money. They will work full-time through law school and not tell anybody, so they're not in debt. So this really spoke to them. And what was really effective was that I said, all right guys, pick the left turn. So, well, was it the second year summer job? No, well, but she was debt averse. I mean, we don't want to, it's offering a lot of money, and we couldn't pick the left turn. And the only left turn we could really pick up was she hadn't been reflective, right? The other thing we found was she had somebody who could reflect back to her who she was and help her kind of right the turn. So that's sort of how we started the session, okay? And what the story really helped us do is kind of set up for the students where values really kind of come into and impact our lives at like the sharp end, right? Picking a career path, navigating that path once we get there, and establishing a good balance between all of the obligations that we have and that we want to have. So we moved from there into group discussion hypotheticals, and the students were kind of grouped into permanent sort of teams for the semester. And basically the hypos were kind of designed to highlight the different pieces of choosing a career path, navigating, and balance, right? And we had the students kind of identify their hypothetical protagonists' values. We had them discuss where the values were in conflict, identify the pressure points that each person was sort of susceptible to, and how they should move forward, right? They were very similar to what Dean Floyd and Professor Longman did, but not nearly as good as what they did. So I'm going to completely plagiarize what they did with us during lunch. Okay, but it's sort of the same idea, to kind of just get the students seeing that this isn't just a simple matter of it's right or it's wrong, right? It depends, right? What else is going on? So we spent maybe about 30 minutes of our 2-hour session on our group discussion hypos. And at that point, that kind of took us through an hour, okay? So we had talked about sort of values and theory for an hour. We wanted the students to come away from the session with more than just the memory of a good discussion, right? We wanted them to have something to hold on to. So we passed out index cards. And one of the things we call these values cards, but they're index cards. On the front side of the index card, we asked them to write down their own pressure points. What are they susceptible to? Is it family pressure? Is it the judgment of their friends? Is it overwork? Is it fear of success? Any number of things, but write down, kind of be thoughtful about what you're really susceptible to, right? The places where you might struggle particularly. And then underneath that, we asked them to write who their reflectors were, right? In our opening story, the lawyer who kind of went for 5 years and had the crisis moment, right? Thank God she had her husband to turn to, who said, wait, that's not who you are. Well, who are their reflectors, right? Now the purpose of writing the reflectors, the intended purpose was, to kind of get them to think about what's my support network and who can I turn to. Sort of an unintended purpose, or an unintended effect of this was so powerful to me when one of my students came up to me and said, I'm so glad you had us write down our reflectors, because the only person I had to write down was myself. Wow. And this was a student who, he had dropped out of school 3 times, had his GED, the kid's brilliant, had his GED, did not come from a supportive family background, did not come from a community where a lot of people were pursuing postgraduate education. And he said, that really spoke to me and told me, I've got to start making a support network right here. My work is kind of cut out for me now. He's been working on that now, consciously working on that right now, ever since that session in the spring. On the second side of the values card, we kind of had them write what we call sort of an elevator speech with a twist. Basically, an elevator speech to themselves. When they are encountering a challenge, a conflict in their values, what can they kind of just stop, pause, and look at and think about as they navigate it? We gave them 3 sentences to complete. I'm the kind of person who, fill in the blank, right? The 3 most important things in my life are, fill in the blank, and I'm living a meaningful life if I fill in the blank, right? And they didn't have to use these, but we figured that if we said, write yourself an elevator speech, we'd get, deer in headlines, I don't know what to do, right? And that's probably how I would feel too right now. Somebody said, write yourself an elevator speech about yourself. So that's sort of how we handled the values card. And we said, now take this with you and pull it out, okay? It's probably going to come in handy this summer, right? It's going to come in handy this semester, right? But pull it out as sort of as something tangible that can help you through, a resource for you that you created. We then sort of wanted to, in addition to kind of giving them a resource they could turn to, also help them develop sort of an action plan for how to become the professional they wanted to become, that they could see themselves becoming. So we had them sort of engage in an exercise, and one was sort of identify the sort of what we call tangible identity markers, right, that you can pursue that reflect who you are. What classes can you take? What extracurriculars can you become involved in? We had a list of extracurriculars they could look at. Again, one of the things we struggle with at UND is that we tend to be commuter, okay? And so engagement is a challenge for us, right? So there was hopefully another happy consequences, but what can you do? What can you do in your community, right? Again, law school, it seems like it's one of the things that sort of that separates us from who we are in law school is that we enter school and we forget about our broader community, right? So what can you do in your community that reflects who you are? Is it volunteer work? Is it church? Is it something else? We also had them kind of think about intangible identity markers, okay? What kind of person do I want my supervisors to think I am, right? What kind of person do I want clients to think I am? How about opposing counsel? And what are the things that I can do to create those impressions, to become that person? So basically, at the end of the session, they sort of had their core values exercise from before, about an hour of good discussion on values, where they come in conflict and what they mean, their values card, and then sort of a game plan for the next semester or the next 2 years. We got great student feedback on this particular session. The students the two things that were most popular with the students, they loved the core values exercise. And we actually loved it too, right? They also really loved hearing the story at the beginning about where's the left turn, okay? And I think they loved it because, again, it wasn't obvious, it wasn't easy. And one of the difficulties in a course like this is that you do get some student pushback and student resistance saying, this is common sense. You know, why are you teaching me this? Why is this law school? Your older students are going to appreciate it, right? But you know, the silver bullets might not see it, quite right at that moment, right? I think they're going to see it in 10 years, right? But they're just not ready yet. So there was some pushback to the course. This particular session, which frankly to me seemed like the most common sense of the sessions, got great feedback, but particularly I think because they had things to take with them from it. So turning to how this could fit into a curriculum, how great if you can have an entire course on it, right? And some school, Mercer I think has led the charge in this. A handful of schools are now kind of in the fledgling stages. I think it probably requires a fairly progressive faculty and a progressive dean. Not everybody's so blessed. But that doesn't mean that it can't fit in, right? The most obvious other place to me would be orientation programs, right? Kind of an opportunity to have the students think about who they are, why they're there, particularly if you're going to give them something tangible to take away, right? Other places, it fits well in the skills curriculum. Anybody that does things like client interviewing, right? That's a great opportunity to talk about who do you want your client to perceive you as, who do you want to be to your client, and how about the other side, etc. And finally, barring other things, a lot of us have sort of non-traditional last class of the semester, last class of the year, right? My typical is how to be a rock star at your summer job, but that class can kind of professional identity could fit really nicely into that particular class in any context. If it is being a rock star at your summer job, or focusing on who are you as a developing lawyer. So those are sort of my ideas on where it can fit into the curriculum. But I would love to hear suggestions on how you guys are fitting professional identity in. Yes?
At Mercer, we often fit it in our externship classes.
Oh, that's a great idea.
The public interest practicum 1 and 2, I know that they have a huge focus is on that. And in judicial field placement, I kind of have the students focus on their observations of other attorneys and things that they're doing that, and we talk about that. If they bring it up, I'm like, well, what do you think of what they did? Is that who you want to be? And then, we have a good contrast throughout the semesters of people they don't want to be and people they do want to emulate. And we talk about, well, why do you want to emulate that, or why do you not want to be that? And reputation comes into it a lot and all of that. And so all of it ties kind of in together, what we were talking about earlier with Pat and Daisy. And so it fits really nicely in an externship class.
And here's what I love about what you're saying is that it sounds subtle.
It's very subtle. I pull it from their journals. I usually, and it always comes up every semester because I tell them to look at, what are the attorneys doing? Who's doing good stuff? Who's doing stuff that you think is questionable? Who's doing ethical things, unethical things, unprofessional, uncivil? And so they have that kind of general guidance along with a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
And it always comes up a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And so we also get to talk about attorney styles. What styles work for you? What persona do you want to put off? If it's just a persona, will it work? Those sorts of things. And so it all kind of ties together nicely. And they do it more purposefully, like with presentations and stuff in public interest practicum. I'm more, I guess, devious about it. I don't want to pull it out and have them say, well, why are we even talking about this? I kind of use their experiences and make them feed off of each other to learn about it.
Okay.
I'm sneaky.
Yeah, no, I like that. Well, and look, I think the subtle and the sneaky is a great way to do it because, again, with the resistance with some students to this is common sense, I think if they're, if they are leading, I feel like you avoid that.
Some of what's missing in the literature on professional identity is discussions around professional identity and difference. So what we've done in part is that we kind of revamped our intro week, intro discussion, interviewing and counseling to add more difference components in. And then I teach a seminar, I know that Sue's seminar as well, that same week. Mine is called something like, oops, what did I say? Avoiding pitfalls when interviewing and counseling clients. And so they go through a series of scenarios around class, sexuality, race, all those things, so that they understand that who they are and how they come off might not be the most effective to who they're trying to have a conversation with and counsel.
How do you get that out of them, in terms of, how do you get them to realize that my instinct may be an oops? How, like, is it a role play?
Yes.
Okay.
So we debrief. So I think one of the powerful sessions in the seminar is around class, and so I have them go through a checklist. It's called a Can I Survive checklist. Can I survive in poverty? Can I survive in middle class? And can I survive in wealth? So it's for them to identify where they believe they fit and where they do fit. One of the rules of the checklist is that if you don't know the answer to the question, you can't ask. So, if you think you're wealthy, but you can't answer a wealth question, then you're not. So then you've got to, and also to recognize that every social economic class that we put someone in has a skill set. And then they go through a scenario where they're interviewing a client, but they don't know what class that client is, and it's a scenario that they have. And so part of the debrief is that they have to identify what was important to that client, and from what was important for them, how can I tailor what I'm saying and how I say it to them. So we do that around difference in all ways, but that one kind of sticks out to me because it's always the most jarring, because class is the big secret.
Right, you don't see class in law school.
Yeah. But I see you talking about that with your students based on being in the upper Midwest and what their concerns are.
Yeah.
Because it's a very present thing and a very important thing.
Yeah. Thank you very much, you guys.
I'm going to take a picture because I'm trying to develop my social media presence. I'm a promotion next year. So I'm on Twitter. I have been for 2 months. So I'm going.
And then I'm going to take a picture of you.
Kate Silver Kelly. And so I'm going to take a picture of the class and then I'll tweet it out. I'm going to tweet it out to LWI online, and so they'll pick it up and then I'll be fine. So
thank you. And for your photo, do you want to take a
I'm
pose? Do you want to strike a pose? Yeah, I was going to wait till you. Yeah, work it.
That'll work. That'll be You can vote too, Debbie.
I was going to say.
I'll just stand here.
I thought that might be
today.
a dated reference. Sorry.
All right, so now I will get started. I'll just stand up here.
I try to be much more.
So good afternoon. As I think we've all figured out, my name is Katherine Silver Kelly. What I'm going to be talking about today is what I call the double duty assignment, and legal writing and analysis, and that professionalism, and incorporating that together, not just layering it on top. And so for a quick roadmap, I'm going to give a little bit of background about myself and my perspective, and then give just a touch of learning theory. I won't bore you all too much. And then transition that into the legal learning theory, and then move into application, and there'll be a little group activity towards the end, and we will then come back and tie that together. And the reason that I start with a little bit of background about myself is because it's the perspective that I see, where I come from, and why I do what I do. And as you heard earlier, my undergrad, I went to Berea College, which is in Berea, Kentucky. And because I went there, I can say this: Berea College has no tuition. Zero. I graduated from a private liberal arts school with zero debt. And the reason that there's no tuition is your family's income has to be under a certain level to go there. We're all poor. In today's dollars, a family of four's income has to be under $35,000. Okay, so, and most everyone at Berea College, I would say at least 70%, and we're talking today, is first generation college student. Quite a few students are first generation high school graduates. And I say that because, and Berea is wonderful. Oh my God, fantastic school. I love it. What a great experience. And I say that because it's not just people that are coming, okay, first generation college student. First generation college students coming from poverty. I'm not talking middle class. I'm talking, kids like myself. I mean, it blew my mind when I found out that my husband, growing up, he drank milk at dinner. Whoa. We never got to drink milk at dinner. That's expensive. There are 4 kids in my family. You could have milk in your cereal. You had water at dinner. Like that, and he thinks it's weird that I drink milk at dinner. So that perspective, and if you're shocked by that, I mean, that's where I'm coming from. That I will also tell you, I didn't know we were poor. I didn't know we were poor, which maybe that was a good thing. But so people here, what I say is I always had, and people at Berea and first generation college students, we have a lot of support behind us to achieve and do well, and people that believe in us, but there's nobody in front of us who are not really sure what to do. And I don't know etiquette. I did not know, well, I know manners, because you don't have to be rich to have manners and be polite, but what fork to use and what is appropriate to wear, I don't know. And I was just at a networking event at Berea, and this fantastic young woman comes up to me, and she is dressed for a professional networking event in a Kelly green one-shoulder dress, so her tattoos could show, and purple tights and black boots. Okay, she is dressed professionally in her mind. Now, I never judged that. I was like, oh, you know, she's fantastic. I'm gonna take her under my wing. We're gonna put a suit on her, and she's gonna go places. But to not know that, you know, that is a disadvantage. And so I see that, and especially, you know, as I went through my education, I graduated from Berea, and then I liked school. I got a couple degrees. I had a couple of masters in education. So I come from this professional educator standpoint. And my focus area is special education. And I was a high school teacher for 10 years before I went to law school. So I went to law school as a teacher. And I go in going, what are people doing here? What is this? This is not teaching. This is awful. You don't even, what do you mean there's one test and I get your feedback? It blew my mind. And so I have these two perspectives coming from, I don't know what to wear, to how is this learning? And so I you know, when I, you know, came into, you know, the teaching profession as a lawyer, you know, I bring these things into my classroom, and I'm not gonna, and I love, you know, all professors, I think everyone has a good heart, and I think they mean well. But sometimes, you know, even if a professor came from a background that was not of privilege, they forgot, and you'll see, oh, can you believe this student did that? Oh, do they not know? I'm like, no, they don't. You know, or why can't these students just get this? Because you didn't teach them. You didn't tell them. Why are you hiding the ball? You know, and, oh my gosh, they wore to class, right? I do an activity, it's not in here, it's a partner status update, and they have to dress professionally. And I had an adorable student this semester came in with cat eye mascara, or eyeliner. But I'm gonna have that conversation with her and say, this is really cute, you cannot wear that eyeliner. It's hard, but I have it. Because I don't want her going out the door, going into the law firm with that cat eye eyeliner and a headband right there too, a little leather headband. We took care of that. But that's my job. Like, I don't think, oh my God, why does she not know? And I had that conversation with her, and it was a little bit awkward at first, and she said, I didn't know. And I said, that's okay, that's why we do this. I didn't know either. You know, so some of the activities that I do in here, I don't just incorporate, it's not just what I do and I'm awesome, but it's just a perspective that I've seen. It's the profession wants certain things from our students, and so how do we give them, the students, these skill sets so they go out to the profession? And sometimes I'll say to my students, I'm selfish. I don't want anybody out there to know, you know, I want them to know, oh, you have Professor Kelly, she's awesome, you're awesome. I don't want them to think I'm a bad professor, so it's all about me. You know, and you might learn a little bit too. And so, you know, that's, you know, the perspective I'm coming from. And so, you know, from the learning perspective, you know, as I was taught, does anybody have a teaching background, like an undergrad? Okay. We learned to write lesson plans with goals and objectives. And goals are the big picture, and the objectives are the action verbs, how we achieve those goals. And so I create these goals and objectives for my course before I start doing, you know, what are the goals of legal writing course? How am I going to achieve those goals? And then I create the assignments from there. And so in doing that as an educator, you explicitly identify these goals for students. And sometimes we all have these great activities where we incorporate professionalism within substance and teach legal analysis. And sometimes we don't actually we know why we're having the students do it. And I will say I am guilty of this. It was really just in the past year and a half, I'm like, I just got to tell them. But are we telling the students, just saying, We are doing this activity because this. Here is the learning goal. Here is the skill set you will take away. And so I begun, and I use the word deliberate, and I have begun, deliberate, making that conscious choice and saying, I'm being very deliberate about what we're doing, why we're doing it. Sometimes it's at the beginning, before I introduce something. Sometimes it's during, if I'm having a one-on-one student revision conference. Sometimes it's after, when we process and talk about, okay, what's going on here? Why do you think I had you do this? But at every point, I am just deliberately saying, what are the goals? Or I'm pointing the student to it. If I have a student, come in my office, we've all had this, is this right? Well, you say, it depends. And they ask, is it right? And I used to say, well, it's not really about right or wrong. And now what I do every time is I say, well, what is the goal of this assignment? What is the goal of this case description? What is the goal of your statement of facts? And I make the student tell me, what is the goal? Okay, so how is what you're doing achieving that goal? And sometimes I'll say, I want you to write it down, or I'll jot it down and say, I'm going to write this down and I'll email it to you. Or I've had a student, I've had students and they're not really sure, and I use that as an opportunity to, okay, I want you to think about this, and tomorrow, please, I want you to send me an email telling me what do you think the purpose of this assignment is, so I can give you that feedback. I want to give you some time to process it. And that's an opportunity to work on a professional email. But then I say, and I want that to be a professional email. Okay, I want to see what you think is a professional email, and then I can give the feedback on that, because we have all gotten an email that says, hey. And instead of me walking out in the hallway going, oh my God, the student said, hey, in the email. Or call me by my first name the first week of class, which is just, I am from the South, and I still don't call people by their first name until I have been asked to do so. No way. Oh my gosh, you just don't do that. And so instead of complaining about it, I've just thought, well, I'm just going to say, please call me Professor Kelly. I'm your professor. And after the class is over, you can call me by my first name, which you will have to do when you're in practice, and it'll be really weird. But, at this point in time, you need to call me by this. So I've just started being really obvious, but it's not obvious. And it's not because every student is poor, but it's because we haven't had that, I think who said, we haven't had formal training in professionalism. Just like, we have formal training in how to write a resume, but no one's taught, and I'm pre-internet, but no one's taught the internet generation how to write a professional email or a formal email. I mean, nobody taught me. I mean, maybe, we figured it out because we're professional, but how many of you, by mistake, or you wrote in all caps in an email, and then somebody said that's yelling in an email? Right? Well, we figured that out trial and error. So create that formalism, teaching it deliberately and saying those words. I want to make sure I'm hitting everything. And now I'm going to translate over into, how thinking like a lawyer and learning, in the legal profession. We all know, I think the theme of this workshop has been, the theory in law school is not what the practice of law is, and how do we incorporate that more? And I truly believe all law schools are doing that, unless maybe you're T14, they don't have to. But incorporating that skill transfer, and that's an education term that it's a term of art that we skill transfer, and we know as legal writing professors that what we're doing in our classrooms, that is a direct skill transfer. But and we also know that our students don't realize that. And so not just incorporating the skill, we call it, at Ohio State it's CRECSAC instead of CREAC, because we have Mary Beth Beasley, who is the best. So, CRECSAC, well, guess what? That's just what you have to do on an exam. That's the same thing. Your professor's going to say IRAC. That's the same thing. Let's look at that in a contract problem or a CIVPRO problem, and being very deliberate and just obvious about here's how the skill transfers. I'm sure some of you all, I know I do. I've worked with professors who are non-legal writing professors in some of the the foundational courses. I don't call them casebook classes because I have a casebook. I don't call them substantive classes because I also teach legal writing as substance. So I just say foundational courses. other foundational courses, and I'll incorporate a case that they've talked about in contracts and use that in the legal writing. Or if I'm doing a civil problem and they're in civil procedure, how to incorporating that. And I have found, the professors at your school who are open to doing that. And the ones that aren't, that's okay, I just see it as their loss. But I know that my students, so I'm sure every school's there, but they have a section and they're together all the time in the same classes. There is at least one professor that they have in that section who wants to work with me, work with anyone in our program. And when they realize that they don't have to do anything, that I'm gonna do it, they're on board, right? All they have to do is tell me what they're doing in class, and then I'll take, right? As long as, don't give them any more work. How can we grade more papers? How can we possibly do more? So, right? And I laugh. But it's just, how do we bring that in? And when we tell our students that, I talked with Professor Rube, I'm going to be doing this, we're going to use this case in our class, and we're going to talk about it. And then he'll refer to it later. Did you guys talk about this with Professor Kelly? And see, they see we're on the same page, and they see how that skill transfers. I also incorporate that into outlining in class. Before I came to Ohio State, I was at another law school and I did all academic support. It comes from my teaching background. And at Ohio State, I'm not just legal writing. My title is Director of Academic Support, but what it means at Ohio State is the bar exam. And when I tell the students, and I'm very serious about this, I am the bar exam. I don't just know about the bar exam. I'm not just the expert, I am the bar exam. I know everything. It's my job to know everything. I can answer any question pretty much about any bar exam in the country. But that comes from my testing background, so I'm always looking at, it's a high stakes test. It's a pattern, it's a formula, I can identify, I can teach that. It really is easy. So I need my legal writing students, I need them to buy in, not just for me as a legal writing professor, but I need them to buy in because I need them to listen to me when they're thrilled and taking the bar exam. So I have this larger goal is I need to build that trust. So I want to create good lawyers and good practitioners, and I want them to trust me that I'm going to help them do that from legal writing all the way through the bar exam. And this year's bar exam was awful. And so I'm looking at the specific objectives, and I put things up, in every assignment. I will state the goals and objectives. I will say, this is my expectation, and I will list the expectation. I don't know how many of you all give out your rubrics for your legal writing. When I have my revision conference, I have my rubric with a checklist, where they are on that, and I give that to them and I say, this is my grade rubric. The only difference between what I'm giving you and what I have is that you have check marks where you are on the scale. The one that I have is going to be blank, and I'm going to put points in there. Here's what I'm looking for. And I specifically say that, and at the top, and I will put revision form, grade rubric. So that there's no question. And it's not feeding them with a spoon. It really makes it clear what I want. I identify opportunities for application, both later on in my class, in other classes, and in practice. Here is where you will use this. One example, it's the last 3 pages in this, I'm sure we flip through. This plays really well for me in Ohio. If you look at the question, it's not numbered, the letter with Retzel and Andrus, because it's about the Cleveland Browns. And we call this the jerky lawyer letter. And so I know this. So we look at the jerky lawyer letter and then Art Modell's response, and they laugh because it's kind of funny. And he is a jerky lawyer, and it's like, you don't want to be this lawyer. And then the last page, and I'm not going to read it out loud, some of you might be familiar with the Jack Daniels demand letter, because it's a beautiful example of civility and professionalism, and it's a big company with a lot of money and a lot of power, writing a letter to, a very small company, a small guy. And I like it, because I am from Kentucky, so I get to play that in. And, we look at that, and so when we write our demand letter, kind of our mantra is don't be the jerky lawyer. What letter do you want to get? And you're trying to convince somebody to take a certain loss now rather than an uncertain loss later. And so how are you going to do that? And I'll use the phrase, and people from the South will know, you catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar, and so why would you be mean? And, so we use that, here's that application, here's where you're going to see it. And we all laugh at the letter from Dale Cox, but oh my gosh, and then look at the response he got. And people know how, everybody knows Art Modell, and some of the students get a little upset because, oh yeah, and then he took the browns away. Okay, but it's, so maybe.
Not that the clump, they can't go on.
Pretty much. I mean, and then, so, but now we got new browns and they have more wins than losses, I think. And then being explicit.
I just want to say, for that letter, for them, if you go to Snopes, they have an update on it from.
Yes, because I'll do that in class, and we look at the response from the person, and the students think, well, that guy was crazy, he should have taken that deal. Well, okay, then we.
No, I meant from the end of the baseball letter, from the Browns letter.
Oh, is there? Oh.
Yeah, there's a
I'll
whole
have to look.
article about contacting them years later about whether this really happened and how they felt about it.
So now I will have to.
Sorry,
I didn't know that. Thank you.
Sorry.
And then, being explicit about the connections between and among the assignments. So it's, and I know that we all do this, but making that explicit connection, either starting with the smaller task and building on it to the bigger one, or when we first learned about case descriptions, and then, okay, now you're going to do it later. Remember when we did this? How did that relate? Or using a student example and building on that, and just, I'm being obvious about this, but deliberately identifying both the professional and the practical, connections. And how it helps is not because students see the light, but it allows them to focus on the how, because we know that writing and learning and legal analysis is a process. So if they can focus on how to do that process, it's not about the end result. It's not about answering the question. It's resolving the issue. And then it also helps them become self-regulated learners, right? Ideally, we want them to identify the gaps in their learning. If I tell you, well, okay, I told you where it was wrong, but that doesn't help them build upon that. We want them to be able to recognize and do that self-reflection, not just as a professional, but in their writing. Well, where did I miss? Why doesn't this make sense? Do I have a thesis sentence at the beginning of each paragraph? And so that goes back to the student saying, is this right? Well, what do you think? We always throw that back, use that little Socratic method. But this helps them, focus on what to do, how to do it, and how to do it on their own. Because I forget who I was talking to earlier. Was it Jennifer? Yeah, when they go into practice and they get zero feedback. And that's a good thing if your partner doesn't come throw it back at you because you typed it in Times New Roman and she wanted it in Arial. That's a true story. But they're waiting and right. But they're waiting for that partner to come tell them, good job, or that was excellent, I'm going to use it. It's not going to happen. And so they need to be able to see that themselves, or if they did a bad job, either it's going to get thrown at them, or they're just not going to get any work. And so we want to avoid that on both ends. And so if it's a substantive skill, I identify it up front in writing, I talk about it, or I incorporate it into the introduction. If it's a professional practice skill, of course it does depend. I am deliberate about it. Sometimes I will tell them this is why we're doing it, because I need them to actually do it. Sometimes it'll be incorporated in the middle, and sometimes we use it as that wrap up. And I want to give you an example. If you look at page 5, the professional attributes activity, and this is pretty much my class notes. And so I'm not going to read the entire thing, but it's the last class of the semester. I actually just did this on Monday, and I have the class where I define what attributes are, because again, I'm not going to assume that people know what that word means, or I want us all to have the same definition. And something that I have learned, I think we all recognize, is that there is a common vocabulary, but we can't assume that everybody knows what that is. And I don't know about you all, but I'm not kidding, it was second year of law school before I realized that at the end of the opinion, when it's, J, the justice signs and puts, J. Smith or, J. Scalia. I did not know that J stood for justice. I thought it was the person's name, like John, or I didn't know. And so I just don't assume anymore. And, so I define that. And then I define what are professional attributes. And then I turn it over to the students and we start brainstorming, and I'm putting them on the board. I almost always have a student scribe who's typing, and then that person will email the list out to the class, or they'll send it to me and I'll send it out to my class listserv. And so we're putting all of this up there on the board and then guiding it to, how do you know if somebody has these attributes? And we all know the answer. You can see where it's building on that. This is the trust, getting the referral. Why is this preferred? And then I always went, so where does GPA fall? Of course, there's silence because it's not there, and they realize I've set them up. I'm tricking them, haha. And so we talk about, so what does it mean to be a good lawyer? And how great do not define a good lawyer. Because we've all met fantastic lawyers, and then the lawyer says, I was a C- student. And we all know people who might have been at the top of the class who are just not that good. Or they should never be around clients, ever. And but it's true, just, they might be really quirky. So I use that as an opportunity to talk about, so why are grades so important and why do we look at them? And it's really that's all we have. That's your brand at this point. You don't have anything that distinguishes you because everybody's got on their resume law school. You haven't done anything. Nobody cares that you were a lifeguard or that really nobody cares that you clerked at some law office because you know that they didn't really do anything, right? So you have to distinguish yourself. You need to, once you get that interview, the GPA's out the door. So what professional attributes do you have to bring to the table that's going to make you the better lawyer? And then I've talked about this with Jennifer. I'm a swimmer, I'm a swim coach, and I show a Ryan Lochte clip because I always joke, if you don't know, he's a very good swimmer. He's very handsome, I'll just say that. And I always say Ryan Lochte is my boyfriend. He's my boy. Actually, he came to speak at Ohio State, and when I said that in class, and then I got this email from a student, your boyfriend is coming to speak at Ohio State. I can get you tickets. I'm like, okay. So go see him. And I show this clip of him swimming. He is a beautiful swimmer, unbelievable, Olympic medals, oh my gosh. And then I show a clip of him speaking. And it really is, and I'm always like, no, shh. That's what I say, don't open your mouth. I don't want him coaching me. I want to see him swim, but is that who I want to teach me how to swim? Just because, you can write well or you got an A doesn't mean that you're going to be good at teaching someone or having a conversation. So when you get that interview, there's your opportunity to market yourself and say, I didn't get all A's, but I'm a lot better here. And so we're doing this as a class, and then I connect it into legal writing because they're going to do their evaluation, seriously, in about 10 minutes after we're done. Giving out the student evaluations, okay, how did we learn those skills in legal writing? But again, it's about being deliberate, I'm being very obvious. I'm saying, okay, so these aren't magic attributes that you somehow have to figure out. No, what did we do here that is giving you these? And we identify those and we create that list. And the last thing that I do is, and I'm not a touchy-feely person, and so this is very hard for me to do because I'm really, I say this jokingly, but it's not. My family motto is suck it up. We just do it. So this is kind of a kumbaya thing, but oh my gosh, they love it. So I pass out an index card, and it's got somebody in the class's name written on it, and it's passed out randomly. And so every person has to write, what professional attribute do you have? Right? And it has to be, it can't be conclusory is what I say. You have good time management skills because, and then they have to, explain that. And we've got still everything up on the board. And then I collect all the cards, and I tell them this. All right, I'm going to collect all the cards, and I'm going to put these, we have lockers, I don't know about you guys, and that's where all their mail goes, and I tell them, I'm going to stick this in your locker at some point during exam week. So just be on the lookout for it. And it's that reminder, and so when you're feeling like I am horrible, I can't do this, I don't know torts, whatever, there's your card. And it's not just you feeling like you're smart, but somebody else says, you are good enough, you can do this, you have what it takes to be a lawyer. And I really I don't even know why I did it. And I have gotten more, students absolutely love it. And maybe it's because many of them are millennials, but I'm seeing that, I think it's the new face of law school. It's not just the millennials, we have a lot of returning vets who come, and they're not 22. We have a lot of people who are changing careers when they're coming to law school. So I don't just have 22 and 23-year-olds. So it's that changing face. And so I think that the uncertainty of law school, it's overwhelming, and to have that little anchor, is important, because it reminds you that you can do this, because, everything the entire semester rides on that 3-hour snapshot. So, so this is just an example of, how I'm deliberately incorporating the practice skill into an assignment that I'm going to do anyway. And what I would like to do now is there are 4 other, and it's almost always in writing. The other 4 sample assignments and activities, I did not put that. And what I want to do, I know I only have 5 minutes, we can do it in 5. I need 6. Okay. And I want to get into 4 different groups, and I never allow my students, of course you all don't either, I never allow my students to pick their own groups. I pre-assign them, almost always by personality. Sometimes I'll put complementary personalities together. Sometimes I put opposing personalities together, and they know it, if they don't like it, it's all, I'm telling them, why am I doing this? Because you have to learn to work with different people, So I won't do that here. But I would like 4 different groups, and then I can just say group 1 will do the first assignment, and I would like you to identify the legal skill and then the professionalism practice skill for each little assignment. How would you specifically, deliberately, obviously say that to your students? So I don't know how many people we have, so if we do like group 1, I just want to get together. I'll tell you who's going to do what. I was going to count off 1 to 4. So you guys, all right, you guys are going to do the private public forum. This group right here is going to do student-led writing style instruction. This group right here is going to do 1-minute This group right here is going to do third-party the substantive skill. Okay. So what's the substantive skill and what's the practical skill? And I'm going to give each group, you're going to have 4 minutes.
Which one is public, private, forum?
That should be the first one. Each one is that the first one? Should be on page.
Oh, sorry. So each group is identifying the substantive skill, like the legal writing skill, the legal writing part that you're, what are you teaching, and then the professionalism or practice skills for the assignment. And there's no brainers. So I'm going to make you do it in 1 minute because I talk too long. Talk too long.
I'm going to tell you what, in theory, I was going to do, is each group is then going to identify, this is the legal writing skill, this is the professionalism skill, so we'd all have that. But I'm going to have one group do it. What are the legal writing skills from this assignment?
Letter writing, email writing.
Critiquing.
And you guys have the, I'm sorry, the forum one, okay. And then the professionalism,
Cognizant of rules of professional conduct, civility.
and so it's basically, are you identifying your specific skill, goals and objectives that you want to get out of the assignment, and then are you telling your students, and I'm sorry I went over time, I have to stop. I'm sorry.